It's just something wild and inhuman in terms of scale. A morning strike by the Russian army on peaceful Ukrainian cities. Unfortunately, there are casualties. Unfortunately, there are wounded friends, including children among them. And all the nuclear power plants instantly reduced their generation capacity because the Russian degenerates were targeting the energy sector, among other things. The situation is truly critical right now. Meanwhile, the enemy has improved their Shaheds and is now hunting and striking our aviation. Because in recent days, in Ukraine, unfortunately, the entire heroic crew of our combat helicopter tragically died. These guys were heroes. They went through the hell of this war. And this happened after a hit by a Russian UAV, after a Shahed strike. What is known about this? Do we currently have enough means to repel attacks? And what do we know about the consequences after this latest act of terror by the damn Federation? That's what today's episode is about, friends. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Well, so as not to waste your time, I'll get started right away. So first of all, it should be said that the Russian army started shelling Ukrainian cities early this morning. And they used absolutely everything they had in their arsenal. Attack drones, missiles of various types. Their main target was the energy infrastructure. According to the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, it was a combined strike. It was a strike of incredible scale because in total, a total of 673 targets were detected and tracked. 635 attack UAVs, mostly Shaheds, as well as drones of the Tam Gerbera type. All of them were flying from the territory of Russia and from temporarily occupied Crimea. Here, friends, it's important to note that the Russian bastards also struck with 3 aeroballistic missiles. Kinzhal, 35 cruise missiles of the Kh-101 and Iskander-K types. But the main figure that shows the result is that out of 673 targets, 621 were shot down or suppressed. 587 drones, 34 cruise missiles, and 3 Kinzhals did not reach their targets. This is important. This is the result of the work of our aviation anti-aircraft missile units, electronic warfare units, mobile water groups, and drone operators. In other words, they saved thousands of lives. But unfortunately, not all of these targets could be stopped because there were hits. And now, friends, let's go through the regions to get a full picture of the situation. The thing is, the strike affected at least 13 regions. 13 friends. Let's start with Kyiv. Kyiv and the region. Here at 8:20 in the morning, an explosion was heard. Drone debris fell in the Sviatoshinsky district. Several 5-story buildings were damaged. As of the time of recording, 6 people were injured. Among them is a child, a 16-year-old girl. And now, a video has appeared online showing a Russian Shahed drone hitting the roof of a 5-story building in Kyiv. Take a look, please. Once again. And these degenerates claim that they only strike military targets. The building was hit while people were sleeping. So, Vishara district, friends, that's Kyiv region. It is known that a woman was killed by falling debris. 3 people were injured, including a little girl. Besides this, let's move on to Zhytomyr region. There, residential buildings and a store were damaged. 5 people were injured, 2 were hospitalized, and a child was killed. A child. And in Khmelnytsky region, here too, unfortunately, there were strikes because explosions rang out in the morning. A person was killed, both in the city and the region. Widespread power outages. Rivne region is one of those that probably suffered the most because an apartment building was damaged and it is known that a utility building was destroyed. But the main thing is the strikes on the energy infrastructure. Almost the entire region, that's about 300,000 consumers, were left without electricity. And this is one of the most affected regions, as I already mentioned. Sumy region. Drone attacks on civilian infrastructure in the Shoska and Konotop districts. Some settlements are also without power and heat. Utility workers and medical staff are operating on generators. Ivano-Frankivsk, Cherkasy, Odessa, Lviv, and Chernihiv regions. Reports, friends, are coming in about attacks on critical infrastructure facilities, mainly energy facilities. In Odessa, port and industrial facilities have been damaged. More than 100 private houses. And all these regions have experienced power outages. And these, as you understand, are just the bare facts, because you need to realize, friends, that behind each of these points are destroyed homes, frightened people, workers, energy specialists, and rescuers, by the way, who risk their lives to eliminate these consequences. But most importantly, there are civilians who have been killed and wounded. Children. This is the real goal of the Kremlin: terror, cold, and despair. That's what they want. And now, friends, let's turn to probably the most dangerous consequences that threaten the entire country when we talk about the bigger picture. Because Ukrenergo has reported that this is already the ninth massive attack on the energy system since the beginning of the year. And it is the Western regions that have suffered the most, but the most alarming news came from the Ministry of Energy. The situation, if not critical, is probably close to it. I can't give my own assessments here, but all nuclear power plants in Ukraine have been forced to reduce electricity generation. Why did this happen, friends? Because of the massive shelling, networks and substations connected to the nuclear power plants were damaged. This means that the plants cannot supply electricity to the grid in full. The increase in capacity will only be gradual after the damaged networks are repaired. In practice, this means an extremely difficult situation with electricity across the entire country for a prolonged period. Emergency power outages were immediately implemented in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Chernivtsi, Poltava, Cherkasy, Chernihiv, Dnipro, Sumy, Ternopil, Zhytomyr, and many other regions. In fact, under attack, the whole country. The Russian Ministry of Defense, or rather the Ministry of Killings of the Russian Federation, cynically claimed that they targeted not only the energy sector, but also military-industrial complex facilities. But we see the real consequences. A missile in the roof of a house, what is that? A military-industrial complex? Well, for Russia, that's how it is now. These are strikes on what sustains the lives of cities and villages, friends. On heat, on water, on hospitals, and so on. These drone attacks actually have another very painful, tragic, and direct military consequence to truly grasp the scale of the impact. Now, about the Russian Shaheds, let's go back a few days. December 17th, Cherkasy region. That evening, a combat helicopter was sent up to intercept the Shaheds, our Mi-24 helicopter. On board was the hero of Ukraine, crew commander Alexander Shahed. And this pilot, as you know, became famous during the air breakthrough to Azovstal in Mariupol in April 2022, delivering vital supplies to all our defenders. But that evening, an unthinkable tragedy occurred because, according to his brother Yuri, the helicopter collided in the air with a Russian drone, a Shahed kamikaze drone. The Shahed was flying extremely low. It was not visible on radar, meaning all the helicopter's systems were functioning normally. It was not a malfunction or pilot error. And the impact, by the way, was so strong that the helicopter was practically torn to pieces. The entire crew unfortunately perished, so I would like to express my condolences to the family and loved ones. And today I spoke with the well-known aviation expert, Konstantin Krivolap, who said that it seems the Russians have upgraded their Shaheds in such a way that they now control them like FPV drones and are already directly hunting our aircraft. And this story is tragic. It shows, friends, first of all, just how unpredictable and dangerous a weapon these mass drone attacks are. Secondly, Russia is improving its Shaheds. As I already mentioned, they are specifically hunting our aircraft. The price our defenders pay every day in the air, literally, fighting against these cheap drones. Plus, President Zelensky's words on the eve of the attack about the fact that we don't have enough interceptors. Unfortunately, this is all a tragic reality, and the effectiveness of various systems. 60 to 90%, but the flow of Shaheds is massive. It's simply impossible to cope with all of this, friends. A helicopter destroyed not in a battle with enemy fighters, but because it collided with a kamikaze drone. So this is a new challenge that requires new solutions. President Zelensky responded to this attack. He called the strike a signal about Russian priorities on the eve of Christmas and against the backdrop of negotiations. And he says that Putin cannot stop the killings. The world is pressuring Russia. It's not enough, that is, right now it's necessary to push Russia toward peace and guaranteed security, although, as you understand, none of this will happen. Air defense for Ukraine, says the Ukrainian president, funding, weapons, energy equipment, these are all processes that never take a break. We'll see if the world hears our calls. So what do we have as a result, friends? First, it's the scale, because this is one of the most massive attacks of the entire war. Hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. And then there's the target. Yes, energy infrastructure and the civilian population. Cold and terror on the eve of the holidays. Christmas Eve, Christmas. The consequences are catastrophic for the energy system because all the nuclear power plants have reduced their output and millions of Ukrainians are without electricity in the middle of winter. Losses, dead and wounded civilians, including children, and the destruction of a combat helicopter, as well as the death of the surgical crew due to a collision with Shaheds. Well, the fifth point is the effectiveness of air defense because our defenders once again demonstrated their skill. We shot down 621 targets, but the systems for countering drones need a fundamental strengthening. The world must help us with means to repel such attacks. So look, this attack is a clear signal to the world that without sufficient pressure on Russia, without supplying the necessary amount of air defense and energy equipment, these strikes will continue, and Ukraine keeps defending not only itself every day, but also the security of all of Europe. That is what they finally need to realize over there. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, take care of yourselves, and see you next time.